I call to order the October 21st, 2019 business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in the audience to please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
All right. Great. Okay, thank you. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Present.
Ms. Bolton?
Present.
Mrs. Bowers?
Present.
Mr. Davis? Present. Mr. Messer?
Present.
Mr. Morosky?
Here.
President Jones?
Here, thank you. The minutes from the October 2nd board meeting will be presented for approval at the November 4th board meeting. Sorry. So in other words, we don't have the minutes from the previous board meeting. Those will be presented on November 4th. Okay, Ms. Bolton, please present the October 3rd, 2019 Student Achievement Committee minutes.
Thank you very much. Happy to do so. It was a extremely well-attended meeting, in part because we had some major community presentations, and obviously a very, very productive and active administration on a number of issues. We heard the report from the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls, promoting women in leadership positions, and we had a number of presenters talk with us and share with us their work, and also, not surprisingly, outlining some of their issues and concerns regarding safety and health and identity. The Commission presented a call to action to the Student Achievement Committee regarding the need to increase the number of schools offering gender-based violence education by 25% district-wide, which would, as you know, include 2 additional schools in the 2021 school year, and a school year partnering with the YWCA and Women Helping Women. A pilot program during school year 2021 and make available free personal hygiene supplies in CPS schools grades 6 and up. The Assistant Superintendent reported back on a number of those items, as did our Science Curriculum Director, Dr. Jennifer Williams. So it was very productive and well. I think we had how shall I say it, not just well-attended, but people were very much involved with the issues that were being presented. And we then also had another presentation regarding the Youth Pedestrian Safety Advisory Committee, where we heard from one of our, I think maybe our 8th board member, Madeline Gerker, who presented an update on the number of the student advisory meetings that have been taking place during Saturday mornings, and also a teacher, Mrs. Campbell from Covedale, as to what they all have been doing, not just the October 2nd celebration and commemoration, but some of the other things they're doing to try to spread the word throughout the district. We also had some shared information as to what were some of the information gleaned at the district-wide LSDMC meeting, and cleared up some of the information that was discussed also at the previous board meeting, I think the night before. We had brought it to the attention of the administration, and they reported back. I think there's only 2 board members current on the board now that were on the board that were aware of or participated in the MOUs with between Carthage School and New Jerusalem, and also John P. Parker and Schroeder High School and MedPace. And we wanted to get an update. Administration presented an update, and I think they have a further one yet to do. One of the interesting concerns there was that there's a sense that maybe the Schroeder connection in that MOU is not necessarily being as well traveled as we had hoped it would be. We had a report on the school board and park board alliance or initiative regarding environmental green groups, and them asking how they can further activate us and themselves within our strategic plan. And it was a great report, and we had 2 of our curriculum directors present a plan that they will now take back to that community alliance group regarding some short-term and very long-term efforts that can be made to meet some of the aspects of our strategic plan. We had Ms. Brooks present on kindergarten readiness assessment, some interesting and good news about that, and also a precursor, a preliminary report, a preparation report, if you will, regarding the kinds of changes that probably are needed regarding our Workforce Development Council and its reportage, and some recommendations will be coming to the full board in that area. We also wanted to have some more discussion about how the strategic plan and our new graduation requirements, taking us all the way up to 2023, can be incorporated and interfaced, if you will, and it's obvious the administration's already working very hard on that. We again continue the deeper dive, very deeper dive, dating back, as some of us will recall, a number of years, where one of the equity issues is the equity within our high schools regarding AP course offering, College Credit Plus offering, and also the idea that this has to be much more district-wide in the offerings. And we are going to continue that deeper and deeper dive, and I would encourage board members to check out the charts, because this is an equity issue, and it also might go to the very core of the curriculum at our high schools, which I know a number of us, I think particularly Member Bowers is concerned and has stated rightfully so regarding the success in our elementaries and yet all the challenges that remain at our high schools. We had a report, and it's attached on the last phase of Vision 2020. We also got a preliminary report as to how many children are attending our district, and we also but continued the discussion regarding boundary lines and growth and where we see some of the enrollment, which is just challenging the space that it's in. I submit and hope for approval, and I also want to thank again the administration and my other members on that committee. We do really good stuff. We also had in attendance the school board folks, and so it was a great one for them to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments? I don't know who was first. Go ahead, Mr. Messer.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. So just a couple of questions on, as it relates to the section here on LSDMC. Did any of the discussion take place kind of regarding the possibility of students being re-engaged as part of LSDMC?
I can't remember if it came up that time, but it is the perennial issue that is there. And I'm sure is probably, I would say it's under consideration next time we review, and if we need to review earlier, I would assume that it will be one of the topics to be discussed.
Can I add to that? And then you can keep going, right? So it didn't come up in that specific one, but to Member Bolton's point, it is sort of constantly coming up. The question, it's really just a question more than anything. If it were, or when it is to be reconsidered, would that happen in SEC or wouldn't that happen in policy?
It would
Go ahead, Ms.
probably
Bolton.
start in SAC and then be referred to policy.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, the whole board has to agree to the LSDMC guidebook. And so it might start in SAC, go to policy perhaps if we want to make it such a policy, but it would be really more likely that it would come to the full board. I mean, you could do this in an expeditious way if indeed there was the interest of keeping the way it is or ending it. I think it's almost a full board kind of.
Yes, and I know
skip and
Mr.
jump.
Messer wasn't done, but I did want to comment that this is one of the items on the board work session agenda, so we don't have to resolve it, because I do agree with Ms. Bolton. It does, I think what I'm hearing from the board is that we want this to be a full board discussion, so I agree with that. Okay, Mr. Messer, and followed by Ms.
Yeah, my
Wait,
second
I'm
of,
sorry.
no problem. My second of three questions is, last year, Workforce Development Council fell under finance. And this year, this is showing up under SAC. What was the reason for that
I
change?
think the responsibilities were divided based upon the protocol of the two committees. The finance is in charge and got the reports regarding the financial aspects of preschool and what have you. HR and those things come under student achievement. And so it was divided up. But what you'll notice, based upon what we've all lived through in the last year and a half, and I think there's probably consensus, although I don't know, is that one of the things I think the administration's going to be recommending, it came to student achievement as a possibility, a precursor, if you will, that very frankly, there not be committee reports from workforce development to either finance or student achievement, but that Workforce Development Council report directly to the board. That the fragmentation, the division of it, it could be part of the more routinized, if you will, reports from the preschool efforts. So that's probably what is going to be proposed. I think it makes sense, but the division only occurred because of protocol of the jurisdiction of the two committees.
Yeah, so I just make a recommendation, because I don't know that I was ever a part of that discussion where that decision was made, but I think just from a streamlining, it was kind of like, because last year I was asked, well, why is preschool under finance? Well, it's because that's where the relationship is, and so they come and report that as an opportunity to do everything in one spot versus cutting pieces and parts. So I would make the recommendation that we think through that, maybe we add that to our agenda.
That is on the agenda.
How
to streamline our work.
Okay, good. All right. Because I was thinking, why weren't we getting update on the workforce development like we had, because they used to show up and do reports last year. Okay.
I
There's that
would
one.
also respond to that is that, again, just like everything else about Preschool Promise and the expansion, this was a plane that's been built over time, partly while it's being flown. And so a lot of the initial charter, a lot of the initial work, the MOU, all those things had to kind of be lived. And I think now with that perspective, I think we're in a much better place to try to improve what we do in time, I think, to make a positive difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we could, we'll add that for discussion. I think just, however it's just decided, consolidating those things into one common place for preschool. And then lastly, just as it relates to that whole average daily membership column, I think probably like many of you, if it's not going out to public meetings, it's Facebook or it's email or it's text. This whole question about redistricting and, oh, you forgot, one was for somebody in Gulf Manor, you totally did this blindly and we weren't aware, and I know school board members are showing maps, and I just want to publicly say to everybody who's listening, there have not been any conversations about any redistricting as a board, and it is something I think holistically that we've talked about, scoping a project that would look at that. But I think just what gets confusing is there is like stuff in here and different schools mentioned, and I think it's best for us as a board that when we're talking that there is going to be, as I understand it, based on one of the discussion topics coming at our retreat, a holistic look at the district. No schools will be favored, and we'll be looking at how we best structure Cincinnati Public Schools going forward to best match our strategic plan, population growth, et cetera. And hopefully we can kind of quell some of the frustrations or concerns or disappointment from people who feel like we might have gone above or over them.
I need to respond to that from a standpoint of the cluster of schools on the east side was a concern brought to the policy committee last year or the year before, where it was talking in terms of the PRM, maybe not including a particular part of their district. And the board as a group has been very strongly not saying that anybody's going to be kicked out of the PRM. But that went to policy, came also over to student achievement. The one thing that I would correct you on is that the creation of cans over 3 years did change boundary lines and was a board vote. We can point to that vote, that the cans neighborhood, the Clifton neighborhood area schools, creating that boundary line according to neighborhood boundary lines was the action of the board, and I'm not altogether, it might have been before you served or right in the beginning of it, and that would then impact, and we established that through board work, whole board work, that would then impact the Winton Hills Academy, Pleasant Hill Academy, and Mount Airy, and possibly Chase. So that was an official act, and if we need to make an assignment to our staff to verify that did occur, but anything on the east side has been undone, or not done, I should say.
I know, Mr. Morosky, you're next, but I just want to repeat again that while it's great that we can have a public conversation about these things, I think we have all agreed that these are things that really need a more robust conversation. So I'm a little hesitant to keep going with we've talked about it. We've had opinions expressed about what the issues are. But again, we're going to have these robust conversations in our work session, which is going to be public. So in order to move the meeting along, I would ask that we kind of keep our comments short and to the point, and I understand that this is important. So if we could just move on so we can get past the minutes, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Morosky.
Thank you, President Jones. I just have a correction in the minutes. It's not a big deal. On page 3, and there was some confusion of this on email, but Student Achievement figured it out because we work well together. On the action underneath youth pedestrian safety with the Schedule E, so the 2 schools is correct for the safe dating program before, but in Schedule E, that was for any schools that wanted district-wide. And so just an update, on October 30th, I'm going out to Woodward to meet with Athletic Director Josh Harden to figure out what that might look like. So also an update on how the Schedule E may be able to help with the pedestrian safety dollars for kids.
And since you raised that question about that action, I was going to make a comment on that. That again, I think anytime, one of the things again, when the board work session, we talk about how we streamline our work. Any recommendation that has a financial implication should probably either go to finance for recommendation or come back to the full board for discussion. So I had the question about, because if we approve the minutes, the action passes and then it moves forward as a recommendation and it has financial implications.
Well,
likewise, likewise, the initiative around the park board stuff, even though it doesn't specifically say, when I see create a short-term, long-term project, that may have potential implications financially. So I think, again, I'm just asking that we better understand as a full board, because I think, we've had instances perhaps, at least for me, I'll speak for me, where things get past us and we ask ourselves, did we have a full board conversation about this? So I'm just suggesting that we defer these action items until we get a thorough assessment of how it's going to impact financially. And it could be part of our strategic plan initiative, but we would need to hear more about that. Ms. Bolton. I'm sorry.
My response.
Ms. Bolton. Ms. Bates wanted to respond, and then I'll get to you. Sorry.
Well, this is back to the discussion of student participation on the LSDMCs, and this is a point of order. That was a vote. Mm-hmm. So
Yes.
to even bring it up, we need someone from the prevailing side to raise the issue. And I hadn't heard that. We just can't bring up issues that we voted on. So that's something that...
That's a procedural thing that we need to...
If anyone from the prevailing side even wants to bring it up. So it may or may not be a discussion.
Okay. I hear you.
And also, there's a typo on page 2.
Yes, there is a typo on
Got
page
it.
2 that we need to correct.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I'm concerned about every single thing we all do, whether it's policy or student achievement committee or finance committee. Everything we do has a financial implication. And that's why we have board protocol creating the jurisdiction for each of the 3 standing committees. And those jurisdictional lines have to be kept. Technically, too, not only is everything financial, no matter what, beginning, middle, and end, but everything also is ultimately a matter of policy. So if down the road or tomorrow, we want to review the protocol that establishes jurisdiction, or even the number of committees we have, that's one thing. But everything would end up being a financial question instead of an educational question, an HR question, a policy question. The perspective is the multiple perspectives, and the original work done in committee is really one way to actually streamline the work of the board.
Thank you. And I think just to follow up on that, the issue, I think, is that clearly we're not clear. I mean, we're not clear whether it's jurisdictional or just the process, how we streamline the work. But there is concern about it, so I think it's worthy of a full discussion.
I would agree.
Okay. Mr. Davis.
I just have one question to Ms. Bates' point about the LSDMC student vote. I didn't understand what you were saying.
I was ask her for clarification around the prevailing
Right.
issue.
If something, if an issue or policy has been voted upon, the board just can't keep on bringing it up until the minority gets their way. So the prevailing side, someone from the prevailing side has to raise the issue.
Okay, I appreciate that. Well, let's be clear. I have not raised the issue, and I'm the only person from the minority. It was a 6-1 vote. So every time Mike brings it up, or Ryan brings it up, or Eve brings it up, it's being brung up from the prevailing side. I was the only one to vote no. It was one of my very first votes. That's why I remember. Because Ms. Wagner was like, huh? And I was like, nay, N-A-Y. So I don't know that that's out of procedure for somebody to bring it up, but I do want to say I'm not certain it's ever been moved forward further than just conversation.
Well, it's going to be on the agenda of the board work session. So before we do that, we need to
Raise it.
Yeah, we need to raise it
Officially.
formally.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
And so can we do that tonight? I'm not quite sure procedurally how we even proceed. I'm a little fuzzy about, yeah.
Let's ask Mr. Hoying to look up the parliamentary procedure.
Is Mr. Hoying here?
There he is.
Did you hear the question, Mr. Hoying? We're trying to figure out how we move forward on the prevailing issue around raising the question of further discussion around LSDMC decision related to youth participation, and how we bring it back to the table for discussion. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Morosky?
Not to steal Mr. Hoying's future thunder, but I believe it would simply be Mr. Davis moving to either amend the manual or moving to open the manual for the possibility of amendment at the meeting, right? I mean, that's all it would take, and then a second and a vote.
He is a prevailing.
Is that right?
So,
No, he's not. He was dissenting.
oh, okay.
But if it was moved to open it up just for the possibility of amendment, then you know.
I would lean toward Mr. Hoying to clarify that, and then we'll follow the
I see how
procedure
it
based on his recommendation.
Just procedurally, very quickly, as we've gone through this reset with the LSDMC piece, it would certainly be in keeping, as we've been reviewing after one full year, and that's all we had so far, was last year. One full year, we have a whole list, which is why in the student achievement minutes, we mentioned issues that were brought to the district-wide LSDMC after the full year. And the biggest issue was the parent involvement, but the student right to vote has been not in that particular line, but has been a perpetual issue of discussion. So it would make perfect sense as we concluded the first year of the reset and we're approaching into the second half, the first half, end of the first half of the second year of the reset. It would make sense that we would want to review some aspects of the LSDMC.
And that's fine, but again, I want to make sure that procedurally we're doing it the right way.
Oh,
And
yeah,
and I
no
think
kidding.
that, you know, and it's, for any other concern or subject matter that comes up, I agree with whoever made the comment that once we vote on something, it stands as a vote, and we got to, you know, what is the protocol for changing that? And so this is one of those issues, and it's actually going to be an assignment, I think, for Mr. Hoying to check that out before we
That's great.
put it on our agenda for business, for our work session. Thank you. Okay, so Ms. Bolton presented, did you present this as a motion to approve? Okay, and I did make recommendations around deferring the action items, but I still hold with that, to defer the action items pending some type of review about the financial implications of that.
I have an issue with that. That would be changing protocol on the fly here, live as we sit, because committees have the right, just as the board has the right to create an assignment, they have the right to create action items. If we're now going to say that committees don't have that jurisdiction,
Okay, I
this
hear
may
you.
not
Let's
be the
just take a
night to do
vote.
it tonight.
Let's just
the
take a vote.
Which
Yes.
items
I
are
would-
in question?
It is on page 3. There is an action item that, right at the top of the page, where administration was advised to review Schedule E for funding to be put towards safety clubs and determine which schools will be available to take advantage of the resource. That one is much more clear than the one down at the bottom. And I'd be happy to not even address that one, because that may be, I don't know what it is, to be honest. When it says create short-term, long-term project, I don't know what that means, you know, but we'll just put it to a vote. I mean, if that's what the procedure is, then we have to put it to a vote to pass the
Well,
minutes. or
and
whatever.
to be clear, the issue of this alliance between the park board and the school board has been in, I think, the last 3 months of the student achievement minutes, with you know, the introduction of it, the possibility of it, even the assignment, if you will, that people within the administration kind of outline what that could be. So, I mean,
Okay,
this
that's-
is not just here new, but I mean, yeah, let's go for the
We'll,
vote.
we'll just, we'll address the motion that's on the floor, and we'll move forward with that. And I do think that this raises, though, some question about what we need to deal with in terms of board process at a later time. Okay, so there was a motion to approve the report. There was a motion to approve?
Just one more point of order. I mean, some of the actions are actually assignments that the full board should be making. So perhaps it's,
I agree with that.
so, yeah,
There's
so
a-
you
the-
could bring
what's-
up
What's
this
the
one.
what's the blurred line in all committees is that action items and assignments have become blurred. I think that's, technically or procedurally, I think that does need to be reviewed. For the sake of the administration, I think that's a much, I won't say better way, but that's a clearer way to approach it, I think.
Okay, well, I'm still not clear, but we're going to put the
That's okay.
motion on the floor. So it has been motioned to approve the report. Is there a second? Is there a second? Mr. Morosky? Are you approving, you second? Okay, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Did you oppose?
Yeah.
You can abstain.
I don't think you can abstain.
And-
Yes.
And I will oppose so that some of these can be brought up during assignment instead of being
Yeah.
part of this report, because there are several that really should be full board assignments. They're pretty significant.
Okay.
So I'd rather discuss them at that point.
That would be
Put 'em in the
fine.
minutes.
But we still had a count, we still had a vote, so I'm sorry? It
Point of
failed.
order?
Right,
Point of order?
yes.
Mr. Hoying, can you answer this on the fly? Can you abstain on a voice vote?
You can't abstain unless it impacts you personally.
Not to put you on the spot, Ms. Bowers, but you're going to have to be a tiebreaker. I don't think you can abstain on a voice vote.
It,
Can I clarify, the vote is to approve the minutes?
Yeah.
yes.
To
So
accept the minutes,
To
but there are action items that need to be
Yeah.
approved.
I think you can abstain because there could be items in the minutes that you don't want to vote on or can't vote on. So I don't think the abstention is the problem. I'm not sure, you may need a more specific motion depending on, it's not just really whether the minutes are approved or not. I think you're getting deeper into whether maybe those action items are approved. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Well, what I'm hearing that makes sense to me, Ms. Bates said, that suggested that there are action items that probably need an assignment, so that we could approve the minutes with the action items following later on as assignments.
Can I ask a question?
I can't believe we're spending this much time on the minutes, but anyway.
I think this is
okay.
I think this is so crucial. I think this is a good amount of time to be spent in the right place, because this is so process-oriented, and we need to spend more time on processes. So this is just interesting to me. So you can't make assignments in committee? Is that what I'm hearing? Is that, I'm really.
Yes, you can make assignments in committee.
Right, but some of them are pretty extensive assignments that would take quite a bit of research by the administration, such as, moving that the Workforce Development Council report to the full board. Well, the full board should decide if,
Oh,
But that would just
That
be,
was the recommend,
that would just
Hold on.
come from the student
That was their
committee
recommendation.
to the full board. It's not it wouldn't be a vote from the.
it is listed as an action to be voted on in the minutes. So you're right, it should come from the full board, so it should be an assignment.
the committee is bringing it to the full board. This is process. The committee is bringing it to the full board, having listened to what they initially are proposing. They're bringing it to the full board based upon these minutes.
Okay, I think we have a motion on the floor, and the motion did not pass to accept the minutes. I think what I'm hearing is there will be assignments during the assignment period where we can clarify that. But this begs, in my opinion, we now recognize that we have to address some of the procedural concerns. So I'll leave it at that. Okay, so we did not accept the minutes. The minutes were not approved. Okay. So let's move on. Superintendent Mitchell,
President
please.
Jones?
Yes, sir.
Should I not meet with Josh Harden about getting money for kids to have safety clubs?
Not to the minister.
I think you can put it as I would suggest based on.
I can do other stuff
I would
besides that.
suggest based on the recommendation, if it's an assignment, but the whole question, the reason why I raised the question is that we have a strategic plan.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay, and the full board needs to have a full understanding about how the dollars are spent. And what are we asking for money for if it is aligned with the strategic plan, then there needs to be something in there that gives us information about how it aligns with the strategic plan and how much money is it gonna cost. My concern is increasingly that that things are coming out of the committees and we kind of glaze over it, and before we know it, we're asking questions about, well, how did that get funded? Or why did it get funded? Or we didn't know about it. And it's incumbent on us to know about it, but I just think to be clear about how we're spending the dollar. We don't have infinite dollars.
No.
Okay, and we have to prioritize and we have to understand how this aligns with what we said our priorities are. We voted on a safety plan, but we don't know in terms of how those dollars get executed, we don't know. That's all it was kind of a simple
I'll
thing.
save it for the retreat, but I just want to say, I mean, my concern is that this is going to stymie our progress, and the way I understand the committee structure as defined by the state of Ohio, it's not up to us to decide how we proceed or the process. The state of Ohio tells us what the process is, and these committees are given jurisdiction to do these
Mr.
things.
Morosky, we've already said that. We've already agreed on that. I agree with that. We need to be clear, though. We just need to be clear.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Okay, we're going to move on. Superintendent Mitchell, please introduce the presentation for the evening.
Yes, so I'd like to introduce our presentation for this evening around the strategic plan. So each board meeting, we bring representatives from the administration to speak about and give an update on the strategic plan. I can't get it out of my mouth. Around the 5 goal areas. And at the end of this month, we will be providing for the board a scorecard on the strategic plan to date, along with the view of a dashboard that Sarah Oliver Trimble talked about at the last board meeting. In addition, just for the board's information, we do plan to have a gathering of the STEP committee to do an update on the strategic plan to date before the winter break, and then again in the spring. So tonight's presentation is centered around student-centered decision-making, and Susan Bunty, our assistant superintendent, will do an introduction.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am happy to be here with members of the Department of Student Services. So as you probably remember, several weeks ago, we heard about student-centered decision-making from our teaching and learning folks who did an amazing presentation about the work they're doing in the curriculum department. Tonight we're going to focus on how we're supporting our diverse learners, our students who are gifted, our students who are English learners, and our students with disabilities. And so Margaret Hall unfortunately could not be here this evening, so I will be presenting on the students with disabilities portion. Chrissy Reeves will be talking with us about our students who are gifted, and Patty Fong will be talking about our English learners. So as you remember, we have 5 broad goals in our strategic plan, and specifically we will be addressing the one that talks about decreasing racial disparities in students with disabilities identification and in discipline rates, as well as gifted and enrichment services. And we'll also be talking about reducing the learning gap, both for our English learners and our students with disabilities, and those are measures 1D and 1E. So Christy's going to spend the first part of our time together this evening telling us more about gifted learners.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
So as you know, just as well as anybody, our teachers work incredibly hard in their classrooms to meet the needs of all students, but what a lot of people don't realize is just how many of those students are in classrooms with their gen ed regular peers, whether they are students with disabilities, gifted learners, or English learners, or typical learners themselves. And we do that because we put students first, and we know that data supports that most students learn best when they're alongside their same age peers, when they are taught by a licensed content area specialist, and when they can receive the supports that they need within that environment. So what does that look like for gifted learners? As you can see, we have over 4,000 identified gifted learners in the district, and the vast majority of them are sitting in classrooms every day with their peers, whether it's in our neighborhood schools, our magnet schools, or high schools of choice. They're sitting alongside their same peers. But we do know that some students have specific needs and have different needs. And so we have 2 gifted academies in which students can learn alongside their gifted peers. There is some information on those numbers here. Note that those are only the numbers for gifted students within those buildings, not the numbers for the entire student body. And another way that we can meet the needs of individual learners outside of those 2 academies, you'll note at the bottom, we have over 1,000 students. No, that's not true. Sorry, I'm gonna backstep. We have over 1,000 single subject and whole grade course accelerations. That's not over 1,000 students because some of the students may be accelerated in more than one area. So some things to celebrate about what we're doing with our gifted students are some of the highlights from our last report card. We had 3 schools that met the gifted performance indicator on the report card, and that's huge. To do that, you have to earn at least 117 performance index points, and the max that you can earn is 120, so it's a very high bar to reach. Another measure that's incredibly hard to reach for gifted students is the gifted value added, or the progress measure, because so many of those students are achieving at such high levels anyway, that to move them from the high level that they're at to that tiny little bit that's just above them, and to keep them doing that every year is incredibly difficult. So to achieve a C or above on that is a major accomplishment. And while we know that we like to compare CPS to schools across Ohio, all schools, and even across the country, because we hold all of our students to high expectations, it's worth noting that among the top urban 8 schools in the state for the gifted performance index, CPS was second only by less than 0.2 of a point. So since other urban districts are facing the same challenges that we are in this department, I think this is worth celebrating the achievement that they made here while still noting that we have some work to do. And now Patty is going to talk about our English learners.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So our English learners in Cincinnati Public Schools, as you can see, we are over 4,000 English learners in grades K through 12 in the district. They comprise about 11% of the total student body. 91% of those English learners sit in general education classrooms because, as Chrissy said, that's where those are the teachers who have the most time with those students. And that 91%, many of them receive services either through a pull-out intervention or an EL teacher pushing into the classroom to support the content teacher. We do have a population of SLIFE students. SLIFE is an acronym, students with limited or interrupted formal education. We have about 9.1% of our EL population who are in sheltered classrooms. Those are students who are newer arrivals to the country. Most of them have significant gaps in their education, either because of war in their home country or the inability to afford schooling. So we provide intensive services, not only in English language development, but they do learn grade level content at the same time so that they're more prepared when they transition out of that sheltered classroom into a general education classroom. I feel like I skipped one. I'm sorry, I'm trigger happy. The buildings that you see listed here are buildings that do have those SLIFE programs at the elementary level. AWL is a campus that's historically served ELs. Also at Ami, Roberts, and Roselawn is one of our newest elementary SLIFE programs. At the high schools, we have Withrow and Dater, and then Aiken opened a SLIFE program a couple of years back, and their population has increased significantly over that time. And the reason for the population increasing in buildings like Aiken is because our traditional EL schools, where we have a lot of SLIFE students, like a Withrow and a Dater, they are nearing capacity or at capacity in their SLIFE programs. And so we're always looking for other sites where not only the principals and the staff will welcome those students, but where the community will welcome them as well. Since 2014, we've had over 2,000 staff in CPS who've participated in some kind of professional learning opportunity around services for English learners. And a big reason for that was the Future Class grant that we received in 2014 that provided a lot of dollars for us to provide that training for staff. But even since that time, because of the growth in the population, teachers have seen the need for additional training. So we have, as you can see, a significant portion of our staff have participated in that. This clicker doesn't like me tonight. Also, since 2014, we've had over 110 of our staff who've completed a TESOL endorsement program. TESOL is teaching English to speakers of other languages. Here locally, UC offers the 18 credit hour program. Xavier University offers that program, and then there are some online schools as well. And teachers have seen the need because of the students sitting in their classrooms and wanting the desire to support them as best as they can. We've had teachers who've gone back for additional graduate coursework and have earned those TESOL endorsements, which are needed to be a highly qualified ESL teacher. With the 2019 report card, the target for English language proficiency, the growth target was that 54% of our EL population would make improvements in their reading, writing, listening, or speaking. Thanks to the hard work of our staff, we had over 59% of our students who did meet that growth target. And the target for this year, it increases by 3 percentage points each year. So this year, our target of growth is 57%. So we're working hard to make sure that we continue not only to meet that target, but to exceed it. Some highlights with the 18-19 report card. Something that really is a great reason to celebrate is that our ELs actually exceeded the AMO in English language arts. And if you think about the nature of a student who's identified as an English learner, and to think that they hit a target on an English language arts test for their grade level, that's pretty remarkable. Also, our ELs exceeded the graduation rate target by over 10 points. We had 13 schools where the EL subgroup met the ELA gap closing target, and we had 13 schools where that EL subgroup met the math gap closing targets, and you can see which buildings those are there. And I will now turn it back over to Susan Bunty.
So as both Patty and Chrissy mentioned, it's important that whenever possible, our students with diverse learning needs are educated with their general education peers. So our students with disabilities, 72% of them actually are in general education classrooms for the majority of their day. The 28% represents not necessarily students who are self-contained the whole day, but students who spend the majority of their time in smaller classroom environments. So if we take a look at how our very small group of students learn best, we recognize that some students need smaller classroom environments. So the numbers next to the disability categories that you see on the screen represent specialized classrooms. We've had a significant increase in students with autism over the last 5 years who have joined our district and have accordingly added classrooms to be able to support them. Likewise, our preschool disabilities numbers have grown, and we've added additional support for those youngsters as well. We also have much to celebrate in terms of gap closing. I'm not going to read all of the schools on the slide who have been able to meet their gap closing targets for students with disabilities, but this represents significant progress compared to where we were a few short years ago in terms of students really closing those gaps between diverse learners and their typical peers. We also recognize that some of our students with disabilities, and in terms of their school environment, earned that value-added grade of A, and kudos to the schools who were able to accomplish that. I'm a bad clicker. Rob, will you help me? Go back one, please. And something that we're very proud of, as an industry, key performance indicators are part of the daily life of folks on the operational side of the house. In special education in the state of Ohio, we get to have key performance indicators too. So we have 13 of them. 9 are around compliance, and the threshold is extraordinarily high. We have to hit 100%. So there is no room for error. So as one might imagine, when you have close to almost 8,000 students, who have disabilities, 100% of compliance requirements around ETR reports and other areas it makes me lose a little sleep. But this year, I am proud to say, this was based on 17-18 data, we met every single one of those indicators, incredibly exciting, and also met and exceeded, actually, the state requirements for reading and math proficiency for our kids with disabilities, which represented over a 10% increase from the previous year. So we also know that we're not content just to do what we normally did prior, that we constantly have to do our best, and we want to be a leader in the field. Recently, our Julie Bassett, one of our intervention specialists, was awarded a national award for her use of assistive technology and was recognized by several organizations for the work that she does with students. And we wanted to show you a short clip about her work.
So IEP teams look at data. They determine whether a student needs AIM. Students who might need AIM are identified throughout the year. Mostly at the beginning of the year, we'll do a lot of curriculum-based measures to determine reading levels. We'll look at past test scores, how they were doing in the past grade. We've recently also, as a district, started using UPAR, which is a tool that helps teachers determine what type of AIM a student might need. I just learned about UPAR, and I think UPAR is great because it does show you, okay, this student may be reading at a first grade level, but when given these supports through AIM, they can attain grade level material. When I talk to intervention specialists and general education teachers, AIM is really a game changer for the students who need it. Having access to grade level material in a format that is right for that student has made all the difference. So the growth that I've seen in my students has been tremendous. If they didn't have the resources on the computer to use, I think their grades would definitely struggle. They can, when I'm not available to read to them or I can't follow them class to class, they know that, well, that's okay. I don't have to get frustrated because I can use these tools on my computer to help me get through my class.
In terms of advice, I would say make sure you know what works for you. Turning pages in a book and then also just reading with my eyes in general was slow and difficult, and I thought I hated reading, and now that I've transitioned almost exclusively, audiobooks, or at the very least digital books where I can have bits of it spoken out loud, I realize I really enjoy a lot of stuff I thought that I didn't like.
Just aim for it.
Aim for it.
Aim for it. Aim for it.
So the young lady you saw interviewed was a recent graduate of Walnut Hills High School and is now a student at University of Cincinnati. Was able to participate fully in all of her classes, including AP, and probably would not honestly have been able to do that without the use of assistive technology. So thank you for allowing us to share with you some of the work that the Department of Student Services is doing around Studentcentric. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Morosky.
Thank you all so much. It was an awesome update. I was exceptionally impressed with all of the AIM and all we're able to do with students with disabilities. The only thing I will bring up and request perhaps in the future is I know at least the folks up here know when I talk about racial disparities, I'm talking about black and white, because there's no institution in America where anybody outperforms white or underperforms black. And we have multiple races, but I've come to believe in my work outside of here, if we don't talk about that gap, the ones in between aren't going to matter. And so I would love to see, and I realize in the strategic plan, measure 1C doesn't have specific numbers like 1D does and 1E. And I know Ms. Bunty knows I bring this up in student achievement a lot about seeing reports about discipline or whatever it might be, AP, et cetera. So that's the only thing that I would request, that next time we get an update on this, that maybe we could see some hard data. And it's not going to be pretty, but again, there's no institution in America where this is pretty. And I think CPS is leading the way by even calling this out. I think it's a big deal. So that's my request, but other than that, this is really awesome. And I literally, before I came to this meeting tonight, was bragging about the resources CPS has put into working with students with disabilities and different abilities. So it was great to see. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you again, Ms. Bunty. This was very nice. I have a question about your SLIFE classrooms. Is there any information or supports for students in SLIFE around cultural differences, especially coming to this country from different countries, and also socio-emotional supports that are needed around some experiences they've had before they get to our SLIFE classrooms?
Thank you for asking. So yes, our SLIFE students, many of them do have needs that go far beyond what the classroom teacher is able to provide. And as far as the cultural piece, that's always a work in progress, but all of the training that we provide for our EL teachers, and when a teacher goes to the TESOL endorsement program, a big part of that training is around the cultural piece. And so our teacher advocates, who are our student advocates, who are our EL teachers and those who've been trained, also then continue to work with content teachers on what are those things that you can do in the classroom to make it more culturally welcoming to our students. Something as simple as learning how to pronounce their name correctly. It means so much. So yes, that is a big focus of the work that we do. And I know with some other departments, there are conversations around culturally responsive practices across all cultural lines. And then as far as the social emotional learning, we do have supports for our students who've experienced the trauma that comes along with being in a refugee camp or crossing an unaccompanied minor. I lost my train of thought of what I was going to say about that. So we have staff who are in the building in peripheral support roles who are assisting with that. And then we are often in communication with Dr. Bunger's team on how we can provide those services to our SLIFE students as well, because they have a layer of additional need that many of us aren't used to working with. And then our teachers have become experts at finding outside resources and supports for our students and community involvement. If you talk to Aaron Parker at Aiken, he has a tremendous team of community providers who provide those wraparound supports for our students. So kudos to our teachers who've gone out and have looked for community agencies to partner with to support the students. It's a growing need. We are definitely working on it, and we are looking at ways that we can support our SLIFE students with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members? Thank you all so much. It's always great to get more information and be informed about where we stand with our strategic initiative. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, moving on. Does anyone have any kudos? Mr. Davis.
I'd like to share kudos to the life and times of one Coach Dennis Bettis.
Oh, yeah.
Coach Bettis passed last night. And Coach Bettis has been a mentor of mine, a friend of mine. I want to send my condolences to Assistant Superintendent Murphy. It's, many years she spent with Coach Bettis, the entire Bulldog Nation, his the souls are at half-mast, and Mr. Bettis was a tremendous asset to the district and a member of the 1988 Woodward State Championship coaching staff, and we're going to miss him. We're going to miss him a whole lot.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I concur with Mr. Davis. Mr. Bettis was a natural when it came to working with our youth, and he will be sorely missed. And sorry for the loss of a dear friend. Any other kudos? Okay. Ms. Bates, please present the retirements.
So I have several retirements to acknowledge from our certificated personnel: Elizabeth M. Ormsby, a teacher, and from our civil service personnel, we have Barbara Banfill and Doris Boaz. We thank them for their service to our children and congratulate them on this new venture in their life.
Thank you. Okay, we're now at the item on our agenda for hearing the public. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak, and Mrs. Wagner will be our timekeeper. When the buzzer goes off, your 3 minutes are up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. When your name is called, please come to the podium to speak. We have 3 speakers, and I'll just call all 3 to the podium. Mia Lastra, Ed Path, and Jacqueline Ennis.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Mia Lastra. I am a parent of 2 students at Hyde Park School, a 2nd grade daughter, and my son is in kindergarten. And thank you for the time to speak with you today. I just wanted to raise some concerns that I have about space at our school. But first, I want to share with you why we chose Hyde Park School to begin with. For context, our house sits directly behind St. Mary Church and the school of St. Mary Church. And so when we moved into that house, people just assumed we would send our kids to St. Mary's School because it's so conveniently located. And we had thought about St. Mary's School and other schools within the neighborhood. But ultimately, when we chose Hyde Park School, and when people asked us, why did we choose Hyde Park School, we told them it's the diversity there. So aside from when we went on a tour of Hyde Park School. When we went and we saw all the smiling faces in the classrooms, that was encouraging. But the very first stop outside of the main office for us was actually a big bulletin board that was shown to us that had a world map, and it had little pins in the map that represented the areas and the countries that all the students' families were from. And that was really encouraging to us. So for further context, my husband's from Mexico, and we're raising our kids bilingual. And so that was, seeing other Spanish-speaking countries represented within the school was exciting for us. We thought, okay, great, maybe our kids, as they're socializing, will meet other kids that are speaking Spanish, or that they'll feel like they can find people that are like them, but also, probably just as important, is that they would find people that are not like them, that they could learn from and appreciate their backgrounds and think about all the things that make us great because of our differences. And then we learned that every year at the school there's a program that's called International Night, where the families go to the school and they can choose to represent the countries that they're from and some aspect maybe of the culture, whether it's food or music or just giving people lessons about, well, for us, when we would go and represent Mexico, it's like, Cinco de Mayo is actually not the Independence Day for Mexico, and trying to just raise awareness, and it's an awesome event. But for us, learning about the International Night, seeing all the diversity being not just represented but celebrated was a real draw for us, and we knew that it was the place for us. And so I just want to reinforce what a strong and diverse neighborhood school Hyde Park School is. It has a great reputation within the city. You want to keep that community intact, and it will grow enrollment and attract more families to CPS. but it needs the space to accommodate those new families. So my daughter, like I said, is in second grade. She currently attends school at the bank across the street from the actual school building, which is not good for many reasons: safety crossing the street twice a day, a crowded learning environment, inaccessibility for anyone with a physical disability, and also just separation from the rest of the school body and so on. There's just limitations based on space, and so I want to thank you guys for looking at enrollment, capacity, and overall growth strategy for the district. At Hyde Park School, we are asking that you take our voice into account as you work through those plans, and let us know how we can partner with you. We'd love to have our school contribute to CPS becoming a district of destination.
Thank
Thank
you
you for your time.
Hello again, board. As a reminder, my name is Ed Paff, a parent at Hyde Park School of a third grader and a first grader, and I currently serve as the PTO president at the school. The last time I was here, it was a couple board meetings ago. We were in Cannes, and I kind of addressed the space issues with the classrooms themselves, and that was the focus of my 3 minutes that time. This time I want to focus on the gymnasium space. Recently, we have, it's still not over, we're wrapping up our readathon event, which is a good partnership between the school and the PTO. The school helps us by organizing teams for the students, and it really enables the students to grow their love of reading by partnering young students with older students. The older kids can read to the younger kids, and the student body really enjoys it, and I feel it's a beneficial program for the school, but it also helps fund the PTO in that the kids collect donors for reading minutes that they log, whether it be family and friends, neighbors, and it is the second biggest fundraiser for our school. And it's a very successful program, but we've had a couple of issues that surround the gymnasium space. To kick off the event, we have a school body-wide rally, pep rally, and we don't have the space in the gymnasium to hold all 550 odd students that are there. I think I checked the wall today, and the capacity from the listed on the building from the fire department is less than 350 students. So with that, we have to go outside for the rally, which fortunately for us on this Friday that we had the event, the weather was beautiful. Everyone was out in short sleeves and shorts, and we got to hear all of the teams. They invented chants for their teams about reading, and it was really a good thing to see. But we also just recently had our book fair also in the gymnasium, and because of its small size, it took up most of the gymnasium, even after condensing as many tables as we could full of books. So that moved the physical education program outside for all of last week. And on those rainy days, then those students missed out on their outdoor phys ed time. And they would go to their homeroom and play different games with the phys ed teacher. I think if we had a larger gymnasium, that I've seen some in the neighborhood that have even curtain dividers where you could have half of the gymnasium hold an event like the book fair, and then the other half could still be used for other functions like phys ed or even for a theater class, because it is a gymnasium / auditorium. But anyway, I just wanted to say real quick that the last time at the Student Achievement Committee, we had made a request for some documents, and I saw some enrollment numbers, but I'd like to see more capacity numbers, and if there are any plans and working that's going on, if we could get a hold of those documents going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Ennis?
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I do appreciate it.
Ms. Ennis, can you speak into the mic? Pull the
Yes,
mic
I'm
down.
sorry.
That's okay. Pull it toward you. Yeah.
Okay.
There
I
you
said
go.
thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I really appreciate it. And I'm here to talk about knowtheircode.com. And basically, what that is we are looking forward to the Cincinnati Public School letting parents and students and everyone know that there is a licensure code of professional conduct for Ohio educators. It was adopted by the Ohio State Board on March 11, 2008, and this is what it looks like. In here, basically, we call this is really students' rights. That's basically what this comes down to. And we have signers who signed our petition. They're right here. And we have 84% of the signers did not know that this existed. 74% of the signers are actually registered voters. We also understand that there is a November 5th levy for monies that the Cincinnati Board of Education, Cincinnati Public Schools is asking the public for. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm just reading what I believe is on Cincinnati Public Schools website. It comes to about $65 million a year, if I'm not mistaken. If I am, I apologize. But the question is how much of those dollars will go to educating parents and students, caregivers, and guardians, as well as the general public about the licensure code of professional conduct for Ohio educators, which is set forth by the Ohio Department of Education. And with this, I would like to invite Ms. Mitchell to sign the petition.
We're not able to do it in this meeting. I think I would encourage you, if you want to have a conversation and the superintendent is willing, you might want to talk to her office about setting a time to talk with her about that.
I understand. I just wanted to send out the invitation.
Yes.
We are knowtheircode.com. Our phone number is 513-800-0123. That's 513-800-0123. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do have that on here. You also checked off that you wanted a written response, so we will.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we have several board matters topics for this evening. We did touch on school boundary changes. I believe, Mr. Messer, that was your topic. So did you want to add to what's already been discussed?
No, I think I put this on here, and it's just generally the comments that I made before. I just think there's this inaccurate belief in the community that we have formalized any boundary changes or anything that goes along with that. Outside of cans, that was separate. But this is recent, and just making sure that publicly we say that work has not begun, but the board has identified that as a key topic of our upcoming retreat. So if people are frustrated, that they can rest assured that discussion hasn't happened.
Okay.
Pardon me, Eve?
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, so I think that's the call out. I think it's the where I was getting messages and things, and again, I know a couple others at least were as well. It's outside of that area.
You know,
Okay,
Madam.
thank you.
Madam
Ms.
Chair,
Bowman.
I will add, though, on that, I think it's important. I know that whenever we do our business, the people's business, the public's business in public, we run the risk of, indeed, the public knowing. And that's the whole concept. And I think this board, particularly over the last few years, has done, whether it's the FC piece or whether it's the abatement resolution, we have been doing progressively more work in public, I think, and I think that's good. I would add one of the issues that did come to the policy committee, to my recollection last year, and perhaps other members will be able to verify it, one of the issues that was brought to us is that the community, and this was policy, the community, there were members of the community who suggested certain boundary lines be changed. And indeed, what the committee, I believe the policy committee, was pretty firm about was that the requested by some powers that be, or maybe powerless that be made, not be made, and that we would not even stand for those changes. So this works both ways, from a standpoint of the community having particular views about what best serves them versus, this larger discussion that we're about to have. But on that instance, I think it was good that the committee basically was very strong in referencing what they understood the board to be interested in not having happen.
Yes.
President.
Mr. Morosky.
And just to put a specific sort of highlight on what Ms. Bowen was talking about, I had heard from my relationships with folks, and it was Winton Terrace and Finlater Gardens, and this sort of weird, gerrymandered, socially engineered boundaries on that side of town where families were literally getting split up. Some folks are going to Pleasant Hill for some reason. The other kids are walking out their back door to Winton Hills. And so it was like an issue of that, and we talked a lot about in those meetings about could we have students at Jacobs Center because it would have been so many. So, but that's I just wanted to put a fine point on that was the answer. I believe that's probably what you were referencing when folks said, why can't, if we're at Finlater Gardens, and I always forget the third housing complex is the private.
Silver Oaks.
Thank you. The private one. It's the private one, right? Silver Oaks. So I just wanted to put that fine point, that's all. But yeah, we need to have the bigger conversation about high schools, grade schools, all the schools.
And I think the bigger conversation should include, how we message what we're talking about.
Yeah.
How we message and timing. And I also have been approached by people in the community about presentations being made about it, and we haven't figured out the timeline for when these presentations, or it's not unified. And so that's the whole issue about that. It's not really an issue about the decision. It's an issue about how we communicate it and how we implement. Mr. Messer.
Yeah, and I think, we've had some incredibly committed parents and volunteers through or affiliated with multiple schools come in and talk about capacity issues, et cetera. And I think, once we get this scoped and we can communicate out that the boundaries can't be done without looking at capacity, and boundaries can't be done without looking at future building needs, et cetera. So this is a big body of work, and I think I can say for sure that everyone sitting up here will accept nothing less than just the most in-depth and deep community engagement through that process, so that we get feedback from the communities which we serve.
Thank you. Okay. All righty. Next topic, Ms. Bowers, I believe that is yours, SEL2 pilot.
Yes, I would first like to thank Ms. Bunty for giving us the email with the links to the 2 identified screeners for social emotional learning. As I've stated before, when one of these, pilots or surveys or screeners was presented during Student Achievement Committee, I had grave concerns, specifically with Terrace Matrix, just because of the format for which they plan to assess, and that doesn't feel good. The presentation didn't feel good. When I looked on the links, the identification of at-risk, specifically pulling out mental health, students with mental health issues, that concerns me. When I observed and researched the panorama, is that correct? That felt a little bit more holistic around social-emotional learning, even with the targets, with the self-efficacy, with the self-awareness. That was more holistic to me for a Tier 3 approach, more so than a Terrace Matrix. And then when I actually noticed that these pilots are going to roll out in January, I was under the impression at that particular SAC meeting where they presented that one of our schools was already using this. And that was disturbing, that that was being done, but now we're saying we're doing a pilot in January. Where is the data from the 2 schools that have previously used it? Which is concerning to me as a parent, that someone would, and I don't know how that rolls out. If parents are aware that their children are being assessed, and are they agreeing to an assessment, and then once the assessment is completed, if there are identified targets, which is 2 areas, I think the 2 lower parts of the tier, what are the outputs for those students, and how is that merged with that lead mental health agency that's already established a relationship with that school? That's data that I would like to see.
Are you asking Ms.
I'm asking
Bunty
Ms.
for a
Bunty.
response?
Yes, Ms. Bunty,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
There were lots of questions.
There were
in
lots
there,
of questions,
so-
because I'm very passionate about how parents are informed about assessment of mental health concerns.
I appreciate your questions. So we had Dr. Bob Ammerman from Children's Hospital, along with Dr. Ty Collins, who is a psychology professor at University of Cincinnati, as well as Dr. Carrie Bunger, our director of positive school culture, and with members of our PBIS team, sit and listen to proposals delivered by both Terrace Metrics and Panorama. Based on, and I think there was actually a third provider as well, based upon their presentation, the decision was made to take a look at implementing at 2 schools for each one of those sites, not doing a full district rollout until we were able to learn more from each of those SEL measures. They measure similar things, but you're right. I think Panorama is really around grit and growth mindset, social awareness, self-management, whereas Terrace Metrics is around resiliency and risk. So in order for students to participate in those surveys, parent consent is granted, and then schools follow very tight protocol about notification of results. So we are hoping to learn from both of those and see which is the best fit for us as a district. They're meant to be used as you just expressed, Mrs. Bowers, around how we provide multi-tiered systems of support to our students in terms of group-type interventions, but also to flag students who are may be in significant risk, particularly with Terrace Metrics.
So again, with those outputs, how do you parallel that with your current mental health agency at your schools?
Yes, so I can speak for Rockdale, which has used Terrace Metrics. They started using it actually last year. So students who are in that one grouping, their families are notified, and then they work with the mental health agency to complete the referral.
So just knowing some inside information
Yes,
about
ma'am.
that.
Yeah.
What happens, say, my concern is that there'll be an assessment, there'll be an identification, there'll be a connection with the mental health provider, but there are some other barriers that are not spoken in this concept.
I understand.
And which are barriers to even doing all of this work. So you can, which the mental health agency can assess, they will provide the information, but the connection of the families has other barriers. So I'm trying to figure out the rationale for this.
I think if we parallel it to the academic side of the house, even though there may be barriers to prevent a child from maybe having homework at home or being able to access a tutor, it's our obligation to be able to provide that perhaps. And so I think that it's one of those things that we're going to continue to learn from as we pilot this, the best way to connect those. Susan Shelton at MindPeace is extraordinarily committed to raising the number of signed consents that we have right now between our agencies. In fact, it's one of our QI projects that we're working on in terms of making sure that when students go from referral to parent consent to treatment, that we are raising those percentages. It is, as you so well know, it is far from a perfect situation, but we are deeply committed to increasing the opportunities we have for our students.
Okay, I just want to also bring into attention connecting also has some financial barriers. Those are the barriers I'm referring to for parents to get connected and for their kids to receive services. And that's across multiple agencies that are in CPS.
What's the financial, you mean,
oh,
there is a cost attached to
There
the
can be a
families?
cost. It depends on the family, and I think that's the big elephant that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah, so
So
one of-
connecting is not the problem, it's the follow-through with the financial piece that some families would have to be burdened with.
Yes, and we have two hopeful things on the horizon for us around that front. One is our partners at Children's Hospital are storming the gates of the Ohio legislature about using Medicaid dollars for prevention and for Tier 2 support. So that will encompass part of the student population. And for the other part of the population, and I served a school that was, we had many families in this situation where their insurance provided perhaps for 4 to 5 therapy sessions, but the child could have benefited from far more than that, and families had to either make a huge financial sacrifice or stop treatment. And the state is allowing us, hopefully, to use some dollars fairly creatively along that front as well.
Very good.
So we're not quite there yet, I'm in all transparency, but I think that we are getting closer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bunty. Okay, any other questions or comments related to that item on the agenda? Ms. Bowers, are you comfortable with?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All righty, so we'll move on to the next discussion around the tax abatement update. And I'm going to ask Mr. Hoying and our treasurer, who are going to give us an update. But just to bring everybody up to date, we received another memo from the city regarding that, and I think they are holding fast to this whole thing around the state funding formula. And so in talking with Mr. Hoying and Treasurer Wagner, I asked them to come up and review kind of where we are and perhaps some ideas and suggestions about next steps. And then also, after this part, our treasurer's going to give us, is the budget timeline related to the tax abatement? No. Okay, that's different. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Now, I want to also say that there was a recent letter sent by Mr. Duhaney asking that we meet, the superintendent and I meet with the mayor and the city manager. So we probably need to address that as well. So the presentation is yours.
So at Finance Committee, so before we talk about the meetings that we've had, the Finance Committee asked me to give just a little bit update on some of the data. So we're seeing an uptick in trend in number of agreements that are being presented to the board for approval. So this gives you the last 5 years and then the current year in the purple column. So we've been averaging about 33 agreements per year, which have multiple parcels in them, but about an average of 33 a year. And we've already been presented this year to date up to 28. So we're already almost close to what we did for the entire year last year within the first 3 months of this year. Having said that, this graph shows the number of parcels. The prior year history is a little misleading because this only shows active agreements, so things that have expired are not on here. But the point I want to show is the number of parcels is actually increasing in addition to the number of agreements. So there's just a lot of activity that's happening. So I just wanted to share that with you in terms of context to the conversations we're about to have.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the treasurer and I met with leaders from the city. It was Paula Boggs-Muthing, the city solicitor, her deputy, Luke Blocher. There was representatives from the city finance department, as well as Phil Deming, I think his name is the director of economic development for the city. It was, kind of two different approaches. The city has still very much is focused on the state foundation formula and how they believe that we've been made whole essentially by that formula, and that should be used to calculate what an appropriate make whole percentage would be for the district going forward. We disagree with that. We showed them that the most recent formula that's already been passed takes no account of abatements. The city could abate every property in the city. We're going to get the same amount as if they stop abating properties altogether. So it really takes no account of abatements, at least the current version that's been passed and is presumably going to be applicable for the next 2 years. The city has chosen a very low reimbursement rate as a starting point in its negotiation, and then believes that these negotiations should proceed by the district, presumably alternating with the city, on reaching a percentage somewhere in the middle of what we would say is an incredibly low and artificially low number that the city has chosen as its starting point. And what I explained our number was what we believe is the make-whole amount, which is the percentage that accounts for the district's fixed rate levies. And rather than compromise that, we were asked to essentially go lower and the city indicated it had upward room to move, but didn't want to bid against itself. And that's not the way these negotiations should proceed, in my view. If that were the case, we should have come in with an artificially high number and said that, we thought 65 or 70% is an appropriate amount. To that extent, or to that point, we've met with the developer community. Jen and I also met with a representative of the development community, somebody who was a part of that presentation that you saw at last month's meeting. We were told that in the suburbs, when the developers go for an abatement deal, the school district percentage is locked, and it's not even a starting point. You can't get beyond a starting point of the school district's percentage will be paid. He used the example of Mason School District, but I think the experience was exemplary of any kind of suburban district. So, that is not the position of I think, our city government. They're asking us to go lower. We declined to do that. At the end of the discussion, which didn't last very long, frankly, the city proposed that we renew or continue the current agreement. They've proposed to continue paying 25% for a 6-month extension. We explained that the 25% only makes the district whole with the city's current $5 million a year payments, that's the quid pro quo for us taking a smaller percentage, 25% rather than what it should be, 32 or 33%, is the city's annual $5 million payment. And I said that I would be interested and perhaps even would recommend it to the board as long as those payments, cash payments, would continue from the city. And they indicated that was not even on the table. That was not possible. So I indicated that I would not recommend continuing the agreement at an amount lower than what we believe is our make-whole amount. Does that summarize?
So one other interesting conversation we had with the developer was an expansion of the VTICA program that's adding pressure to this negotiation table. So for the public's knowledge, the VTICA is a voluntary tax incentive program contribution that the city asked developers to participate in to get their abatements. Originally, it started to help fund the streetcar, but we were told in this meeting that it's now expanded citywide, and it's up to 15%. So they're asking the developers not just to pay our 25% pilot payment, but another 15% on top of that. 7.5% is to go to a neighborhood development fund, and 7.5% is to go to a lower income fund. And so I think that's why that downward pressure to get us to reduce our value is to help support that fund.
Yeah. And just to add to that, again, making sure you understand what that means. So a developer coming into Cincinnati now that seeks an abatement they would have always had to pay, or at least for the last 20 years, they have to pay our 25% pilot, right? And then on top of that, the city is having the developers enter into a voluntary agreement to pay another. It's 15% currently, but it's varied through the years, and that's the VTICA. So total, a developer's paying about 40% of what they otherwise would pay in taxes if they have an abatement. In other words, 60% of their taxes are abated. in pushing us to take a lower amount, I don't know what the city's position is on this, but I don't think they're proposing to lower the percentage that developers have to pay. I think they're proposing probably to increase the percentage of the VTICA that they would receive. This really a zero-sum game here in a lot of ways. And so, and again, in Jen and I's view, and the treasurer and my view, there is room for the city to make the school district whole without de-incentivizing development in Cincinnati. That the city could not pay the $5 million, which they have for the last 20 years, ensure that the school district gets a make-whole amount, which again is only the fixed rate levies. It's not including the fixed sum levies. That we'll receive those dollars anyway because those are fixed sums. That makes sense. They would have to lower their VTICA amount, but again, there's still room for them even to charge a VTICA of about 7 or 7.5% if they think that's. So it's been very frustrating negotiations from our side, I think.
Right, the city team is still refusing to acknowledge that the state foundation formula does not give us extra money. And there was another point I was trying to make and I forgot it. I lost it, sorry.
Can we answer any questions for you?
Okay. Board members have questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Morosky, I got you.
I just have a comment. So regarding that letter, I know it's going to, the letter requesting for Mr. Dehaney to meet with Superintendent Mitchell, President Jones, and Mayor Cranley. I think I said this at Gamble or something to this effect, that the back and forth letters isn't helpful. These meetings don't seem to be helpful. I think superintendent and the city manager need to figure this out with that number of 33%. If we can agree on that as a board, I don't know if we have. I feel like we tacitly have maybe, but I mean, explicitly. The 33% an annual audit and a shorter agreement, I've said since February, whatever the number, it became 33%, but I would just like to go on the record as saying, I trust the superintendent to work with the city manager. I don't even know if no offense, President Jones, if you and the mayor at this point need to be a part of it, but that the two folks who are running the show, we need to figure this out. I don't know how I feel about extension, but I just heard about that for the first time tonight, so those are my 2 cents for now.
That extension does not include the $5 million payment. They have not, they cut it out of their budget.
Okay, Ms. Bates.
Thank you.
Okay, let me, I got it here. All right. The treasurer has to be at the table.
Right, I think so.
I mean, there's no way that, as well-versed as Ms. Mitchell is on all of this, you're the one who knows the details. And I, as cynical as I tend to be, I think you were deliberately left out of that invitation. Number 2, from what I understand, the mayor doesn't even have a decision on this. That this isn't going to be something the mayor says, okay, we're doing this. It's council. So are we talking to council at all about this? We need to find out for sure who the decision maker is, and I don't think it's the mayor. So he can hammer out what he wants, but he may not have the support to get it through, is what I'm understanding. And, as far as the extension, that's off the table. I mean, and that's what, Treasurer Wagner implicitly recommended in the presentation. We should decide as a board, I know that 33% has been thrown out there. Mm-hmm. We should come up with a number and say, this is it, or we go it on our own. I don't even see why there's a reason to negotiate, especially if bad information is being negotiated from as a baseline, and the decision maker the decision makers aren't even in the negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Messer.
Yes, and I'm just going to put a couple points because they kind of summarize different things that I was thinking. But just as a process guy, what a hot mess of, you know, there's nothing laid out to say this happens here, and this is who, you know, finally looks at and then votes on, and then there we go. And that piece is, I think, what we're missing. I think we just call an audible, and I think we go into city council, and I think we say, we have, here's the journey we've been on. We're sure you've gotten this update from your administration, but given we're going to rehash kind of where we've been, we're kind of at a point. We're unclear on the decision-making process that the city has, but it is our understanding that it is city council, and that we would like to get from them as a body how they would like to engage in a formal decision, and, you know, kind of make it public about just, I don't care who it is, but just tell us who the decision-making body is, because nothing against the mayor. He could decide, he could agree to something, that city council could deny it. And so we've wasted all this time in that meeting. So my 2 cents is we call an audible, take a presentation, do a current state of where the negotiations are, all the meetings that took place, and kind of where we think we are in the gap, and ask for their guidance on what they suggest next steps could be.
I also, I got you, Ms. Bolton. I also think, I like that suggestion, but I also think we need to go in with a firm number. This is our bottom line, and we're sharing it all with the entire council, as opposed to 1 or 2 people, because I think that's part of the problem. But anyway, Ms. Bolton.
Yes, a couple things I would agree with. I don't think the administration has ever been interested in resolving this. And so I think continuing to talk to them or be delayed or get an extension is not to our benefit.
No.
And I do think that we suggest that we are the decision-making body. We've laid it out in public discussion and resolution, and that I would agree that 9 members of the city council and each of their chiefs of staff get a summary of what has gone on, a summary of obviously our resolution, a summary of what we are proposing as what is our stance, and present to them. I think you also have to find out for sure that indeed it is a council-wide decision. It's my understanding it is, but just to verify that with their own legal counsel, because, I mean, even the way a previous legal counsel at City Council interpreted the new charter language, the mayor got a lot more power than anybody thought that the mayor was going to get in the new charter. So verifying that it's a council decision, it's time for us to deal with the council directly, publicly, firm numbers, present the history, and now bypass the mayor and the administration.
I think Ms. Bolton's suggestion certainly captures more of a presence for us. And so I think preparing the material, sending it to them, and going down there physically to present is what I'm hearing you say, which I support.
And I might add, knowing, having done this last year, and all of us have done it once or twice along the way, even if it has to be us going in as a public body, but even appearing individually in the 3 minutes or 2 minutes that we get to present. So I don't want us to have a giant delay about a formal mutual meeting, because we gave those up, months ago. But there must be a way that we can at least do this in public.
Yeah.
That's important, that the public's business be done in public.
Yeah, I do, Mr. Davis, I didn't forget you, but I do want to say, though, like us, they sort of put parameters on speakers.
Sure.
And so I don't, going down trying to have each of us speak, I don't think they're going to allow that. But I think if we all go down and we have a spokesperson and we address it.
Show up.
Yeah,
Yes.
we show up. Yes, Mr. Davis.
I just wanted to ask Ms. Wagner and Mr. Hoying what the city's belief around the state funding formula, how they can be so stuck on it. What is How is that happening?
So their position is that the state funding, the old state funding formula uses property wealth as part of the wealth index for each district, relative to the other districts in the state, right? So one district can get really poor, and that would make us richer just because of the relative change. But in that calculation of property wealth, which is one of 3 indexes, is the abated and tax exempt properties. They remove that. So in concept, you would think that that does help us because they remove the amount of abated property values from that calculation. However, we've been on the cap because we can't grow. We're growing, our revenues are growing faster than their formula was allowing us to. So last year, we lost $5 million in the state funding formula. So whatever happened with the abatements, it doesn't help us because we lost $5 million in revenue. The third part of that is when they went back there, Billy, his name is an attorney there, went back and calculated, he did each year in isolation, and you can't do that. Each year is dependent on the year before that. And so he made mistakes in his calculation. They just don't want to acknowledge that because it doesn't help their story. Does that make sense?
I mean, I understand that, but I just don't understand how it seems so clear to me. So I'm just really stuck on how the city administration is so far off in regards, and how do we get city administration? I understand the concept of having these conversations with city council, but if city administration doesn't understand the concept, the actual configuration of how the funding flows, how does that happen? How can we help city administration?
We've tried. I've taken the Mike Sobel, the expert, was on the phone. We've sent them all his calculations. I don't know what more we could do to help them to understand the math.
Right.
It is years and years of this misconception at City Hall that the district is getting essentially twice reimbursed. The funding formula was established to make sure that, to not penalize districts who looked wealthy, but when lots of properties were abated and were not necessarily receiving property taxes from those, but it was never to make the district whole. There is a chart that the city puts up in every presentation you'll see about this topic that makes it look, and there's no numbers attached to the chart. It's a bar chart. It's the same chart that was in the developer's presentation that was delivered to you a month ago. And it makes it look as though every time a property is abated, that the district's revenues are just magnified so that we're getting double or triple reimbursed. There are no numbers in the chart. The data that backs it up doesn't support the chart. Our expert looked at their working papers and couldn't really make heads or tails of it. Our own expert, provided us some analysis that we've provided to the city at this point that shows that when we were getting the $5 million payment, there were some years that we did okay, and there were some years that we didn't quite make it, but that we did okay, even including the state funding formula. So,
except the last couple of years when we've been on the cap.
Mr. Davis.
One final question. How far were they from, with the extension piece, from $2.5 million? It just was not considered, or?
Wasn't budgeted, and that wasn't on the table. It was.
Refused to discuss it.
Yeah.
Just wasn't happening.
Ms. Bolton.
Two additions, maybe part of that presentation or the volume that we send to City Council, bypassing the folks that we've been talking to, has this predicate in it, that the data that the city has been using is inaccurate, and be able to prove that with actual experts about that financing. I think you're going to have to prove that the foundation of their knowledge is wrong in order to have enough of an opportunity to inform the City Council. And then I know we've asked for this before, and we've gotten what I would claim, rather, at least maybe it's to my not being able to understand it, a brief, I don't want to say superficial, but not very in-depth alternative to what what we're doing, and propose what Mr. Davis asked about several months ago, which was, okay, if we don't have an agreement, what does that mean for us just by state law? just this, I mean, you've given us some specifics, but I know that there are others as well. But I think people need to know that we have considered not having it at all. And I don't know if they think we would be so afraid of not having it that they think we're over the barrel on it, whereas if we have more power, it's not our core work, we don't want to have to do it, but I don't know, we seem to get along better with the developers than we do with the city.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Morosky.
I've said this before, I say it every time it comes up, so I feel obligated to say it now. I think it's a bad idea to not have an agreement. I also think the city council idea is going to make this messier and more political than it already is and maybe even needs to be, and I just want to go on record saying that. Support the will of the board, as you know. I don't think this is the right move. I will repeat what I said. I think Laura and the city manager should talk, stop at the letters, Treasurer Wagner as well. I know we're saying it's not working. I just think, I think this is going to get messy unnecessarily, and that's fine. But that's just my 2 cents. And I do think we should work toward a deal, though. I am not in favor of saying we don't need this deal. I think it's a bad idea. By the math I've seen, I just think it'd be better to have a deal. At 33%, however we can get there, we can disagree about what's the best way to get there, but.
Okay, I hear you. Mr. Davis.
I just got one more question and a comment to Mr. Morosky. So, Ms. Wagner, if we didn't have a deal,
That's my question.
would we have had 28 individual abatements to assess?
No, probably.
That's hard to say, because we don't know if there's no abatement deal, would they continue to go forward with that project? Nobody can really determine that. But if all 28 you have 18 that you're going to approve tonight, 18 agreements that are agreements between us and the developer for them to pay the 25% pilot payment. We don't know for sure that if there was no agreement, all 18 projects would move forward. But if they would, then all 18 developers would be here on a Monday night asking for approval.
Well, I would say, Mike, that does seem like a lot of work, but it would be better than not having the right deal. And secondly, to Mr. Morosky's desire to have administration work with administration, I would second that if we were then to go back to the third party, having communications with city council, which I suggested 3 months ago.
My opinion is that that's the way to go. I actually don't believe that the city manager gets it, period. And obviously, I mean, I don't know how the information is getting to him, and I'm totally confused about Cranley's role in this, so I don't know what the intention of the meeting with us would be, but I think doing it the way that it was described by Mr. Messer and Ms. Bolton would certainly make the point. But then my question then is, what happens if we don't have an agreement? Is there an option? Is there another option around like litigation, or does it get that far? I don't know.
So sorry, should I respond?
Yes.
To that? Yeah, so we've presented a couple times the chart that shows what kind of abatements the city can offer with our approval and what kind of abatements they can offer without our approval. So a CRA, for example, they're able, instead of being able to offer 100% for 15 years, I think they're able to offer a commercial CRA for 50% for 15 years. For a TIF, I think it goes from, with our approval, from 30 years, and I apologize, I don't have these numbers right in front of me, but I believe it's 30 years for 100% to a 10 years at 75%, somewhere in those range. So there's lesser abatements that the city still can offer without our approval. We would get, or pilot payment, correct. We would still get some revenues off of those during the time of the abatements, and generally the abatements are shorter term as well. So once they come off, we're getting then full revenues, which is good for us. It's really hard to try to say whether or not developers would still go forward with those projects. I do think it's safe to say the city is not necessary. The city writ large, our community is maybe not as well off, because the full abatements that are available to offer under state law, the city would not be in a position to be able to offer those, and, you know, may lose out then to neighboring communities or to, you know, across the river or whatever. That's my.
Okay. Ms. Bates?
I mean, one aspect to this that's obvious, but we haven't discussed publicly in this session, is that if we negotiate and negotiate down, the chances of us ever passing a levy, especially with new money, goes down as well, because we're going to be losing people who are making up that difference on our fixed sum levies. So the city really could care less about that. That's not their business. They, you know, there will definitely, I believe, be backlash from the community, much as, you know, I mean, look what's happening to the commissioners right now. And not saying what they're doing isn't deserving, but we really have to keep our taxpayers and the fairness to them and the fairness to our kids and our ability to raise money for them, you know, in this growth mode, first and foremost. We're, you know, I'm through negotiating Melanie Bates's, and I'm ready just to play hardball and say,
Right.
Let's lay it on the line. Who's making the decision? This is what we need. Or, you know, we sit here until midnight and listen to 28 developers. I'm
Right.
in.
Okay. Ms. Bolton and Mr. Messer.
Just to close, at least from my perspective, the reason I'm interested in not having an agreement, at least knowing what it would mean, is that I don't think the city wants to lose its options, its discretion that it has. And it seems to have much more discretion under an agreement. It may lose more money or may cost developers more money or what have you, but I'm not altogether sure they want to change the power position that they're in, where they just send something to us and we basically have to agree to it because there is this agreement. So, I mean, I would just like us, like Mr. Morawski, I would prefer to have a good deal, a good agreement. And like Ms. Bates, I'm willing to, you know, reestablish some of the work that we do if we don't get one. But right now, they need to know, I think, that they wouldn't be carrying on in the same manner that they currently are. And right now, the public is with us, not necessarily with the city. And if we have an extension or go much further, we might lose that support. And if we get a bad deal, we definitely are not going to get a new levy anytime soon.
Okay. Yeah, I think most of us agree with that. We have Mr. Messer and then Mr. Morawski, and then we're going to try to make some decisions so we can move forward.
Yeah, my comment was just about kind of the going to city council. And I think, you know, you can never go wrong by just communicating and openly discussing. So I think we'd have to worry about our messaging. We don't want to go there and say, hey, well, so-and-so did this or whatever. Just say, we feel like we owe you an update. Here, you know, because this was a topic at when we all came together, and say, we don't have one of those meetings. We are quickly approaching the deadline. So short of getting our two boards together, we'd like to come here and give you an update. We have a couple of key questions, and I think putting it, let them discuss from there, but make sure that they know where we are, at least kind of where our perspective, and say, here's what our hope is. We'd like to see X, Y, and Z, and we would, you know, welcome any ideas or support and their feedback as we kind of go forward. So I think it's just really a check-in, board to board, versus a, hey, we want you to go do X, Y, and Z, and just, you know, taking an opportunity to publicly share kind of current state and then our requests.
Mr. Morawski.
So I think we can all agree we want to get the most we can for the kids. I want to pick up on something Melanie said. I think that what it's going to come down to is what is that strategy from this meeting going forward? And I may be on the outside of that, and that's fine. If we can get to 33% that way, whatever strategy we can to get that, I don't necessarily think that's the right way, but that doesn't matter. What does matter is we get the money. And so I agree with you, Mel, Miss Bates. It's getting late, getting informal. Miss Bates, no, I'm not calling you Bubby. Miss Bubby. You're absolutely right. If we do not get our share out of this, it puts all of those future levies, especially the new money levies, in jeopardy. My stance, however, hasn't changed, that to do that, a deal is the best way to do it. And the only reason I say it, and this is to Ms. Bolton's point, and I will look at the experts over here, is that the city can still give abatements without our approval. It's only for a certain length of time, like 30 years or something, they would need our approval. They can hand out abatements without us. They don't need us to okay every abatement. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's my point, is like, I don't know that we do have as much power as we might think we have. And I'm not saying we don't have the cards and the most power. I think we do. But I don't think we have as much as we may like to think we have, and I don't want to see the city say, you know what, forget it. And then they start handing out 15-year abatements. We don't see a dime of anything, and then we're going to sit here and I just want to be careful that that doesn't happen. Now, they probably, ideally, to Ms. Bolton's point, with the deal, they can give out bigger abatements. So in that sense, we do have the power. I don't know that it's is lopsided one way or the other. That's my only position.
Okay, so,
Can we get clarification on just what that power is?
what,
Because I'm under a different impression than what Mr. Morowski's under
Well, I
in
would-
regard to our portion of that abatement that they could give. So can I get a clarification from administration as to if we have no agreement,
Yes.
the city can give an abatement and we can lose money?
So the city can give an abatement. The abatement is only on the new value of the property. So we would continue, just like now, the current value of the property is still taxed, same rate, same income. The new value of the property is abated for a CRA up to 50% without our approval, up to 100% with our approval. Does that make sense? So we would get 50% of the taxes that we would otherwise get if it was fully taxable. Currently, with our deal, we get 25% of the full share of taxes. Does that make sense?
Calculate the loss.
Yeah, it's hard because because there's a difference between, 25% of the full share of taxes, okay? So we would otherwise get 33% of that in fixed rate levies. So the loss is the delta between that 33 and 25%, roughly. Does that make sense?
So, okay.
Kind of.
I'm usually pretty good at summarizing the conversations, but I'm a little lost. So I'm going to do my best to try to summarize what I think the board is saying. But in terms of options for how we move forward, what I'm hearing I think everybody is saying, let's do this, is I'm hearing that we have to have an agreement, right? Am I correct? We're saying we have to have an agreement
No.
of some sort?
No.
Okay, so, all right, well, let me back up. So what we want to do is we want to provide city council and the chiefs of staff with a kind of presentation around the state of our journey, how we got to this point. We will give them as much information as we need to give them to establish our position, right? And then I heard us say, we need to be clear about what the decision-making process is. So if the process is we go to city council, that's what we want to do. We want to present to city council. Ryan said we need to go in with a here's our hope kind of thing. I think it needs to be a little firmer than that. I think it needs to be very straightforward, and bottom line is this is what we want, period. And then ask the question, how do we want to engage with them? And we go into that discussion knowing what our position is and what amount we're asking for. And I also think it's important to say, as part of that presentation, exactly what you said. You know, we're accountable to the taxpayers. We cannot have this process ride the backs of our taxpayers because the city doesn't want to work with us on this. That's what I'm hearing. So does that make sense? Does that make sense in terms of what we want? Next step? Now, the thing about this is, that again takes a little time. My understanding, we wanted to try to have an agreement in place by the end of the year. Is that correct? So we recognize that putting this together, we got to do this with a pretty aggressive timeline, which means putting together the information, getting it to each council person and their chiefs of staff, and preparing for a presentation to the council, to the full council. Yes.
Just
Yes,
real
sir.
quick question. Do we have a copy of that latest
Letter?
letter? asking
Everybody
for-
should have gotten it, but it was on your email.
But is there, not,
That's it.
that's October 3rd. Was there a more
that's-
recent one than
no,
that?
That's the last one. Right.
Oh, so that was,
Yes.
oh, that was a
Yes,
separate.
that's the one, yeah, it was a separate one.
Got it.
Yes,
Okay.
Ms. Bates.
And what I didn't hear in your summary that I heard from some of us is that the board, with the recommendation of Treasurer Wagner, establish a hard number.
I think I said that.
Did you?
State our position and our bottom line. Okay.
Okay,
Recommendation for bottom line number.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, are we good with that, to move forward? Everybody good with that? Yes? Yes, I'm looking at everybody, okay.
Well,
Mr. Davis.
when you say present, how are we presenting to city council?
Well, my understanding is we give them the written material first to all council so that they're prepared. We establish a time when we go down. Now, we
So when you
talked
say
about
we,
showing
when
in numbers.
When you say we, you're talking about the board?
We said we were showing numbers. I think we do need to decide who's going to be at the table presenting.
How are we going to get time at the table?
You could, I
You
mean,
have to-
you're a citizen, you can always get 3
You
minutes
can,
at the table.
yeah, you get,
Yeah, but that's
Two,
not
I'm
even
sorry.
going to be broadcast. They don't broadcast their public speakers.
Correct.
I don't know. I don't know that we can fix everything.
Yeah, they do.
Do they now?
Yep.
They have what?
Any
What?
Yeah.
broadcast public.
Yeah, okay.
But I think we could ask for a presentation, as we did for the strategic plan. They let us come in, and I think they gave us 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
Did
We
you have to
can-
go to
we-
committee first?
Let's make a request for an extended presentation. Yes, ma'am.
I might suggest that we make a request to appear before the council finance committee.
On the council
I think virtually everybody on council is on their finance committee. And for their processes, a committee action has a little bit further to go than going directly to council.
Okay.
I mean, procedurally, that makes sense, and that's also where we would find, I think, some of the people most already involved.
Okay. All right. I think everybody could be good with that. All right. Okay. We'll talk. We'll talk. Okay. All right. Where are we?
I don't know, but
Budget timeline, sorry. Yes. You have a couple of sheets, handouts in front of you.
Yeah, so the one with all the pretty arrows on it. So I was asked to present this at Finance Committee last week, but we kind of ran out of time. So we just thought we'd share it with the full board, that we're getting ready to kick off our next budget development cycle. We've already started planning, and Sarah Trimble Oliver's working on student projections, which always feeds our staffing out in the schools. So the month of October is used to do that. Typically, you have a board retreat and determine what the budget priorities are. The good news is we have a strategic plan that's already scoped out for the most part. In November, we'll be finalizing the projections and working on the staffing formulas. In December, we'll be working on projections for the students with disabilities, English language learners, and gifted. And then in January, we're actually pushing back the equity process this year a little bit to get some more information based on the current year's equity requests and how successful they were. So we're going to push that into January. And then in March and April and May, we'll be doing our budget engagement. all along, the Budget Commission will start meeting, so we need to schedule those meetings with the hope that by June 1, we'll have a board-adopted budget. So it's kind of high level because it's in draft form at this point. Can I answer any questions?
Questions? Yes, Ms. Bolton?
Comment, it's unfortunate that we had to move our retreat into November for both the growth discussion and what have you, but hopefully the president and the vice president have put on the agenda, because I've heard a lot of things tonight that might be on the agenda, is that that is going to have to be the time that the board presents, at least individually or as one, budget priorities. So that we're not, once again, or like sometimes, already too late in the process by the time the board can suggest things.
Well, I hear you, and we've done that consistently every year. I think we can put a discussion on the agenda.
Right.
Hopefully, our board priorities will align with the strategic priorities, so that we're not putting in separate, a separate wish list. That's for lack of a better description. Yes, Mr. Messer.
I have a suggestion on that, because just as you were saying that, we could create a doodle poll that would then produce a document with everyone's feedback and just list each of our components of the strategic plan, and then we can list any thoughts under each of those, and it would just be a reference point to kind of check and validate, so at least capture those by section of the strategic plan for discussion.
Okay.
You don't like that?
Well,
Okay. It was just an idea.
since it's you and I, we could figure that out. It's still, okay, we'll go with that, but thank you. I hear you. Okay, any other questions then about the timeline? Okay, thank you. All righty, we're gonna move on here. Okay, I'm gonna ask Ms. Bates to present the following resolution.
Yes, I have a resolution appointing an official delegate to the Ohio School Boards Association's 2019 Capital Conference. I present this resolution as printed for adoption.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
And
Well,
now I'll discuss.
discussion.
Yep.
Yes. And I believe last year, Ms. Bolton was the delegate. Who was the delegate?
I was the 2 years before that.
I wasn't.
I think Carolyn was the delegate last year.
Who was?
Carolyn.
Okay, so my question is this the same role as the trustee?
No.
That's what I was appointed to. Was I
No,
also
you were a
the-
delegate to the OSBA
Okay.
Delegate Council during the leadership
Okay.
conference.
Well,
in
they didn't
November.
ask anything of me, so.
You
but
just
I
had to
will
show
be.
up at the
I
meeting.
just show up, and I'm happy to do that again.
And we
I'll just
also
show
need an official alternate. Who else is attending that could?
I would suggest, Ms., do you want to do it?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Messer.
So now therefore be it resolved that the Cincinnati Board of Education appoints Carolyn Jones as its official delegate and Ryan Messer as the official alternate to the OSBA 2019 Capital Conference.
Thank you. Any other, okay, Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers? Aye. Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes, thank you. Motion carries. Okay, so the next resolution, I'm going to ask Mr. Davis. It is a resolution to request a waiver for alcohol.
A resolution to request a waiver for alcohol use at Clark Montessori High School by the Clark Montessori Foundation. I present this resolution as written for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers? Aye. Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, Superintendent Mitchell, do you have a report?
I do, and I do have a really short PowerPoint presentation of our students. But before I get into the presentation, I'd like to be able to highlight that we have now gone through our enrollment and removed no-show students. So for example, each year, our student bodies, they roll over to the next year. And then once school begins, we go through the process of removing kids who did not actually show up. So I'm happy to say that we are above 36,000 students. We are 80 students above projection, and we have grown by 553 students from last year.
Awesome.
Yep, so that's good news.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yep.
It is. All right, so to highlight our students, Woodward Career Tech students participated in a beautified local park event, and they worked on Roselawn Park in the area on their project of cleaning up that park as part of the Roselawn Community Urban Rebuilding Corporation. And so we're really excited to showcase our students doing some beautifying work in that area.
Beautiful.
Also, I'd like to highlight Roselawn Condon. It is working to establish their students as leaders, as well as to really focus on their STEAM focus for their schools of arts and sciences. And so students by grade level, they rotate to different classes, each devoted to a specific component of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Thank you. So it looks like I'm advancing, and I'm just pointing the clicker, but I'm not actually doing it. CPS kicked off Meals with Shields with CPD. So we're really excited that our director for student dining services has been able to pull together an actual event where we can provide meals for our students in which our police department eat with them and enter into a partnership and a positive relationship with our young people. On October the 8th, we hosted our annual college night, and that was here at the Education Center. There were lots of universities and colleges here, as well as parents and students, and so it was a full house. Later on in November, on the 13th, will be our College Credit Plus information night from 5:30 until 7:30. And so we're excited to be able to talk to our parents and to our young people about earning college credit while in high school. Walnut Hills High School teacher Jeff Lazar has been identified as an outstanding educator by the University of Chicago, so we salute him. And then our last recognition is for CPS's International Jazz Festival, which was a wonderful, wonderful night. 250 of our students had the opportunity to take place in master-led courses throughout the day, and then they had the opportunity to play in the evening. It was wonderful. There were 5 world-recognized professional musicians who were on stage playing, and it was quite an eventful night. So it was our very first International Jazz Festival, and it was a hit. And that concludes my presentation in addition to the written recommendations.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do I have a motion to approve the revised recommendations of the superintendent?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes, thank you. Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Ms.
I
Fowler.
have a question, Ms. Wagner. Can you explain about the PNC card memo vendor for Clark Montessori, it looks like, for airline tickets for spring intercession to the Philippines?
So they do their intercessions, and they just put all their charges on the PNC card.
So the district pays that, or do the families pay that?
What page is
Page
it?
8.
It comes from the student-managed student activity fund, so the funds are coming to support students, but it's not coming from our general fund. So however they're getting money into that, whether through donations or parent fees, is
Okay.
supporting that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Wagner, please call a roll.
Mrs. Bates?
No on 13, aye on the rest.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
President Jones?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, moving on, inquiries and updates. Again, I want to, again, apologize for all the confusion related to the board work session. The intent in changing the schedule was to ensure that our superintendent was able to attend, even though she said to me, it would be okay because she could make sure that someone covered for her. So you all can hold me responsible for canceling that. But irregardless, we still need to reschedule. And given that we have this budget timeline and everything that's going on, we sent out a doodle. We did not get responses from everybody. We got the most people attending. I'm sorry? You didn't get the doodle?
Email?
Email? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so the date where everybody can attend, there's no date that everybody can attend, unfortunately, unless we push it back, to the third week in November. The superintendent is out for a week in between there. Ms. Wagner is out for a period of time, but, her hours. So, you all can, we could pick a date and go with it, but somebody's going to be upset because they can't come.
This is why we have committees, too, but I'm not going to go
Ms.
there.
Bolton, I didn't ask that.
Should
Answer
have
the question.
listened to the superintendent and kept it on the 19th.
I didn't ask that either. I need some direction on how you all want to move forward.
I second Mr. Davis. What, have we picked a date? Have we settled it on a date? Did we settle on the 7th or 14th?
We're having October 26th.
October 26th
That's
is
Saturday.
Saturday.
What happened to that?
We can't do it. We're not prepared to do it on the 26th.
We should have been prepared to do it on the 19th.
You
I'm
all,
not-
I get that. I get that. We got to set a new date, guys.
I thought the 26th was one of the dates. There was an option, that's why I was asking about it.
Will we be able to?
I'm out of town
Hold
on the
on.
26th. I can't be
had a
there.
personnel on Saturday. Can we do it on Saturday?
You're out of town.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
you send her the date, yeah.
He's out of town.
Do it without me.
No, no,
I'm on man out
Okay,
today.
how about,
no, Mike's
this,
not here.
this is what we're gonna do. If we have to call everybody personally and get a date, but we're gonna take the earliest available date that most people can come.
Most?
Well, I don't know any
So we
other way to
cancel?
do it. We cancel, right, we cancel.
But we're going to settle for most board members?
Well, my question was,
What's the next date? Can we just go by the dates?
yes,
November 4th.
we can do, November 4th is a regular board meeting, that is an option.
Everybody has that on their
It
calendar.
lasts that long anyway.
November 4th, that's a Monday, regular board meeting day. November 4th, we can do it.
Start at
Let's do
5.
it.
No
Before the,
executive session.
election, I
Right.
think that'd be good.
We will start at 5. And I don't know how many times I can apologize for that happening, but again, people start saying they can't come, and I don't want to do a meeting that our superintendent is not at. That's just bottom line.
Yeah, then my aunt died, so we could have done, well, you guys could have done it, but
Right.
it was
Thank you.
two of us out.
Yep. All right, November 4th, and we will do that from 5, we said 5 to 9. No executive session meeting.
Madam
Great.
Chair,
Yes,
will
ma'am.
we soon see the
Yes,
agenda?
ma'am. We will.
Because I know the growth piece is there, and now the budget piece and some of these other issues.
The agenda, I believe, is ready
Okay.
for review.
As long as we add that budget thing.
Yep. Okay, good. All right, Mr., you want to do that one?
Okay. I am going to recognize one of our own with the Green Garner Award finalist. Congratulations, Eve Bolton. Each year, the Council of Great City Schools at its annual fall conference presents a board member or superintendent with the Green Garner Award, the nation's highest urban education honor recognizing outstanding contribution in urban education and named in memory of urban school leaders Richard R. Green and Edward Gardner. Sponsored by the Council, Aramark Education, Scholastic Inc., and Synergistic Inc., the Green Garner Award is the namesake of the first African-American chancellor of the New York City school system and a businessman and former school board president of the Denver Public Schools, respectively. This year's Green Garner Award will honor a board member from a member district in the council. So, congratulations to Eve as a finalist.
Finalist. Yeah, thank you
this
very
award.
much. I really appreciate the folks that nominated me, and of course, every individual success is a group success on a good board like ours.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, moving on. Are there any assignments?
Are we still in inquiry and updates?
Yes.
I have
Do
a-
you have one?
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question about Woodward football games. And I'm having, people have been calling me saying we're going to cancel the rest of their games.
Good evening. I have had an opportunity to speak to the principal, the school resource officer, the athletic director. My understanding is there aren't any more games scheduled at Woodward. That game Friday was their last scheduled home game, and there may be one more away game. I do not think it is a CMAC game.
So they're playing the rest of their schedule.
Yes. Now, the two young men in question they do have some disciplinary consequences that would prevent them from being at that game anyway. But yes, one more game.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All righty. Any other inquiries and updates?
I have one.
Yes.
I know that it's been sort of a board initiative for the last few months, and I know the administration's been working on the newer position. I think it may even have been posted. We were calling it economic development. I think it came out of our last October retreat. And just wanted to know if maybe we could have a description of what that might mean, what that job description looks like once it fits within the civil service, because I don't know if it's in this, I don't know if it's, would like to make sure that it meets the criteria that the board was most concerned about.
Mr. McDowell?
Good evening. The position was posted. It is under the CAS agreement, so it's a manager level position. So this isn't anything that would go through the Civil Service Commission. They have already done one set of interviews, and they have a second day of interviews, which they're wrapping up this week.
What are the expectations, Madam Superintendent?
So based upon the conversations that we heard last year from the board, this position would work with the community in helping to identify where's the next best place that CPS needs to have a school positioned. And so in addition to looking at the current property that we have and buildings, look at what is the acquisition in terms of other buildings or properties that we want to acquire, so that we're constantly in front of the development that's taking place in terms of what's the next upcoming community where we want to have a school positions. And so that was the what we took away from the conversation that the board had. In addition, I know that the board did talk about this person being engaged in the community and also being able to attend city council meetings to hear what's going on in terms of development in the communities and within the city. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're at assignments now. Assignments?
I'm assuming that the discussion we had about abatements has already been captured in
I think so,
assignments.
yes. Anything else?
I wonder if I can give an assignment to Ms. Bunty to get some data from the 2 schools that used Terrace Matrix from last year, to see,
The 2 pilot schools?
well, I guess, are those
Or
considered
does-
pilots, the ones that were using it last year? Okay, yeah.
Okay. Any other assignments? I believe we asked Mr. Hoying to follow up on the one concern to clarify the process around raising an issue once it's been decided. Yes, no, that was an assignment. Okay, all right. Okay. Any other assignments? Yes.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask my board members to help me remember, because I've been in here searching and I can't find it. But Ozzy and Melanie, I had a question on a policy question, and you suggested that the way to get that in the process would be make an assignment at a board meeting, but I can't find the...
Are you talking about violence in school? You sent me an email about that.
No, it was before that. No, I think I sent an email just saying what would be the process to look at this, and I just can't find it, but.
Okay. Are you want to search for it, or can we move forward?
Well, move forward.
Okay, all right. Any other assignments before we adjourn? You can always put it on the next meeting. I'm sure it can wait. Okay, all right. Having no other business before us, I declare the meeting adjourned.